Bonjour, nous sommes au Paris International Film Festival. Je suis Lesley Hunter, the moderator, et je suis très contente. I'm very pleased to introduce Dekel Berenson, the director of Anna, a short film that has had more than 300 selections to date, including premiering at the 72nd Cannes Film Festival, being selected by the Toronto International Film Festival, and achieving Best British Short Film by the 22nd British Independent Film Awards. Anna was also nominated for an Israeli Oscar, as well as a Ukrainian Oscar, and currently it is a contender for the Oscars for the American Academy. And to those of you who are listening, we are really excited to have you here with us, and you can go and see Dekel's movie in the virtual cinema, which should be in the bottom right of your screen. So let's get started. Welcome, Dekel. I'm really happy to have you here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So I find Anna very interesting. It's the story of a middle-aged Ukrainian woman essentially looking for a way out of her circumstance. I recall she worked in a meat factory and was looking for a better life. So what inspired you or led you to come up with the story surrounding Anna?
So I have the Ukrainian roots actually, and related to that, I've traveled in Ukraine 7-8 years ago, something like that, and I spent there more than a month. And when I was traveling there, I got to know the people and the culture, and I got to hear about these parties. And then about 5 years ago, I decided to become a filmmaker. So I was looking for ideas for making a short film, an idea to make a short film about. And Anna, the story behind Anna, these parties, it's sort of like a weird, interesting phenomenon. And I thought it would make a good subject for a short film. And I was actually working on a series of short films, 5 of them that together would make one omnibus feature that's made from 5 different parts. And Anna is actually the second part of that series. The film before that is called Ashmina, and I'm still planning to finish the project someday. So I'm actually in the works of continuing it while also working on my first feature. So that's the story of really making a very long story short. That's the story behind it.
That's great. And are the themes of the other films within the project kind of centered on a similar theme, or all kind of?
Yes, so absolutely. So actually, the stories all about. First of all, each of them takes place in a different country, and they all tell stories of sort of disenfranchised women, and stories of women or girls of different ages and backgrounds, and they're very different from each other. So Anna, like you said, is about a middle-aged woman in Ukraine, and Ashmina, the previous one, is about a 13-year-old girl who works in a paragliding landing field in Nepal. So that's about child labor and children's rights and stuff like that. And Anna is Anna, and then each of the stories is like different story completely, but around similar themes. So that's the story behind it.
Very cool. And for Anna, as you mentioned as well, why a middle-aged / 45-year-old woman as the central character? Why not a young, hot Eastern European vixen like we often hear of in documentaries surrounding the topic of American men looking for mail order brides, which seems to feature more attractive and youthful women?
Well, yeah, I guess that's the part of the point of the film, that somebody who's not as young as and super attractive or whatever would also want to go to would want to potentially meet somebody and have a kind of like a way to improve her life and move away from her circumstances, like Anna. And she deserves, too. I mean, I imagine that, I know that in these parties, not only just young women go to these parties, but older women too. And I just thought it would make a much more interesting story.
I found it very interesting in general. And like you said, to the point that Anna is not, young. She's not, by everyday standards considered attractive. Even the agent from the Love Tour, I remember when they were meeting, doubted that Anna was indeed 45. And that's another curiosity I had was, Anna was truly 45. She wasn't lying
No.
about her age. I
So
was wondering if she was.
my idea is that she lied. My idea is that she lies about it, that she's not 45. She says 45, but she's 55 or something like that.
Right.
So she looks at her and she looks at her and she's like, okay, whatever. I should
She's
just
like, what do we have to lose?
I'm here anyway. So like, yeah. So
Cool. Yeah, that was something I always wondered. I'm glad you answered that. I was always like, oh, I wonder if she's older and lying about it, or if she just
yeah.
looks older than 45, and the agent doubted that. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I actually thought that more people would catch on it that she's lying,
yes.
Because I think there's no, that she doesn't look 45. Although, I mean, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Her character
yeah.
to me didn't look much older than 45. It just
Yeah, if she would say like 48, if she
person.
would say like 48, people would be like, yeah, she's 48,
Right,
So,
exactly. So to
yeah.
me, yeah. I recall, in terms of scenes and what really initially stuck out to me, I recall the first scene in the film was, for lack of better words, dark and more dreary. I remember witnessing the meat factory where Anna worked, with visuals of bloody dead pigs. I'm curious as why you decided to start with a dreary, more bleak scene.
Well, you want in a film to immediately establish the world of the character, but I think that it's more than just a bleak scene. The meat hanging from the ceiling is sort of like a visual metaphor for the women, in later scenes. So, so actually, when I wrote the very first draft of the story, she was cutting meat and she was working in a supermarket. So there was still the element of the meat, but then I thought, why not to take it further and go and shoot in a meat factory? So then I told this to my producer, and she said, no, there's no way. And I said, yes, we have to go and try to find a meat factory. And he said, okay. So then the location scout started looking for a meat factory, and we were very lucky. I mean, if we wouldn't find that place, God knows if we would be able to, to find it somewhere else, because there's not a lot of meat factories like that, and usually it's like a sanitary issue. You're not allowed to go in. You have to make them agree to do that, and we were just super lucky. So yeah.
Yes,
And I have to add,
yeah.
that I'm vegan. So for me, it was even more difficult to walk around in this disgusting meat. Like, for me, it was awful.
Wow.
So,
Yeah, I'm sure. And even myself, not being full-time vegan, I love vegan food. Even for a meat eater, it's kind of something where you're like, I still still wouldn't desire necessarily to be in surrounded by these carcasses.
Yeah, it's awful.
In terms of, you mentioned, as you just mentioned, finding kind of that place to shoot in, which was by normal standards difficult, but you were able to establish that. How was it difficult to find other locations, or what was your process of choosing different locations for the scenes filmed in Anna?
Yes, I literally traveled to this town, which is 8 hours by a train, to look for locations, but even the interiors. It's a process that takes weeks, really, really weeks. Also, there were scenes in the film. We shot a couple of scenes that didn't get into the final film, and they involved many factories. And we ended up shooting for a few hours inside the largest metal factory in Europe, or something insane like that. Like,
Wow.
yeah, and we were again so lucky. They never allow anybody to shoot there, and we got permission to shoot there. And in the end, it didn't get into the final cut of the film,
Oh,
so it was awful. Anyway, it's a super long process, but it's actually what I enjoy the most. Like I enjoy location scouting and finding the places. It's maybe I don't know why, but it's well because it involves traveling, I guess.
yes.
So it's maybe the activity that I like most about this process. It literally takes weeks. Um, um, but yeah, but other than that, it's not difficult. It's just like you need to know what you're looking for. And then you have to be lucky to have a good location manager, so a person that knows how to negotiate and
Yes.
get you the permission to shoot there. But then also a lot of times you're kind of like you're looking for something, but you're not sure what. So you can end up driving for weeks. Like you can literally, I'm not kidding. And I drove for weeks in California looking for something, not for this film, but for a different project.
Wow.
And you're just driving, yeah. And I was just like, literally for like I drove so many hours and days around Yosemite in California because I was looking for something. I wasn't even sure what, right? And only when you find it, then you know that you found it. But until then, you just walk around, and it's a very funny process. Anyway, so yeah, it's very long and difficult, but it's a fun, and I enjoy doing that, so it's not a problem.
That's great. Yes, it's a great thing that you enjoy that process because, as you mentioned, I'm sure for some it could be quite
Yeah,
overwhelming. But
I also got stuck with my car in a river,
oh
and
my
the
gosh!
and the, and the water came. Yeah, never mind. It's a long
Oh
story,
my gosh!
but
I have to
that
hear
happened.
this. This.
That happened also when I was there looking for locations in California. There was yeah, I was just going after my GPS, looking for places. Like now, when I think about it, I drove to some dangerous. Like it was stupid a little bit because you also get so far away, and your cell phone doesn't work necessarily in these
Right.
remote areas. Anyway, so I was driving someplace and there was a river, and I thought that I'm on a 4x4 car, in a 4x4 car, because that's what I booked. Okay, I booked a 4x4 car. But then I didn't get it, and I didn't know. And when I found out that it's not a 4x4, it was already too late, and I was
Oh
stuck
my
in a river.
goodness.
And yeah, and my phone worked, so I could call for help. But if it wouldn't work, oh my God, I don't know how I would have been stuck there. And
Ah,
Jesus.
the
Anyway,
dangers of
so
seeing location selections. Yeah.
yeah, of location scouting alone, because I was
Location,
also alone.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad you survived that. So
Yeah.
that we
I
can.
also have like other funny stories. Like in Anna, it's a scene that didn't get to the final film. I wrote in the script that you see a field and a horse with a carriage
Oh,
goes
wow.
through the picture. Yeah. So and then my producer in Ukraine, she reads it and she's like, "No, what are you talking about? There is no horse with a carriage. What are you talking about? It's 2018. It's not good. No, And I was like, and I'm like, look, it's East Ukraine. It's a city in the. It's not Kiev. It's like they argued with me, and I'm like, anyway, the story is that when we went to the place where we wanted to shoot, we go out of the car, and the first thing that we see is a horse and a carriage walking.
Ah,
Like,
that's
just like
right
in a
on
movie.
cue.
Yeah,
Right.
just on cue. And it was also like after it was snowing. I think I have pictures of that somewhere. So it was snowing the night before. So everything was white, and this horse and this carriage were going, and it was so perfect.
Oh,
And anyway, I started laughing, of course, because they told me like, "No, it's stupid. You shouldn't put it in the script."
right.
So it's like
Meanwhile.
it doesn't happen in real life. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Anyway.
That's yeah, it's kind
Yeah.
of like you can only laugh at that point. You can
Yeah.
laugh to keep you from crying. Another scene in which really stuck out to me, and actually was my favorite scene, just because I have a strange sense of humor, was the one in which Anna and her potential American suitor, you know, the hillbilly from Texas, were sitting down at a
Yeah.
table with the Ukrainian translator, who translated for them, as Anna spoke Ukrainian, I'm assuming, and the man spoke only English. So as you obviously recall, when the American asked what her hobbies were and what she enjoyed doing for fun, Anna described various things such as going to the movies, reading novels, and interesting
Yeah.
conversations.
Walking hand in hand in the streets.
Exactly, walking
Yeah.
hand in hand. But of course, when translating back to the American, the translator said, basically, she loved to cook and clean. So the scene,
She has no hobby. She likes cook.
exactly.
She likes clean. She likes keep everything okay, and that's it. Yes.
Exactly. I found that hilarious because Ryan, if there was an internal dialogue that was said out loud, it was if the translator was saying, "Okay, you're sounding too complicated. I'm just going to say you like to cook and clean," to say what the man
No,
like
yeah, that's exactly
like
what's happening.
to
That's exactly what's
hear.
happening.
And it was, even though in a way it's unfortunate, and another way from the viewer's aspect, for me watching it, it was funny as well in a way. And so, you know, this scene was one that obviously touched on the idea of a woman needing to sound and or be submissive in order to be desired, at least by these particular American men. Is this what you were aiming? I'm assuming this is what you were aiming to portray through this particular scene.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what was the film trying to address regarding a woman's role and her purpose?
Um, Wait, exactly. I got a Skype call when you spoke the
Oh,
last
no
sentence.
problem.
But let me answer the first part. The first
Yes.
part was that, yes, of course that was the idea. I mean, she says these romantic things. I like to walk hand in hand, go to the theater. So the translator, she's, know this Texan man, and she thinks that's not what he wants to hear. He wants to hear that she just wants to stay home and clean and everything. And like, yeah, so that's what. And so yes, like Ukraine. So it's funny because she's sort of telling him what she thinks he wants to hear. But on the other hand, the irony of it is that Ukraine itself is still a very traditional culture, where the women they get, so many of them get married and start making babies when they're in their super early 20s, if not late teens even. You walk in the street, not in Kiev, although also even in Kiev, but if you go away from the capital, you see a young, like a baby, and then the mother is like 18 and the grandmother is 39 or something like that. So it's a very traditional country in itself, right?
Wow.
But then this the Texan, he comes with his own thoughts on what, because really in reality these parties are real, right? I didn't make up the
Yeah,
parties. The
they're very
parties,
well.
and they really, and part of their marketing is that, forget about American women and go and meet somebody in Ukraine with traditional values. And not a lot of people know it, but Donald Trump actually met Melania in one of these parties.
Ah.
Yes, he was, well, not exactly, but in a sort of the party like that. So, yeah, and we see how, what a wonderful couple they are. No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
I
Anyway,
know.
so yeah, but what was the second part of your
Yes, yes.
question?
Of course, of course. I know it's a longer question. The second part was, what was the film trying to address regarding a woman's role, her purpose, her value? Which you answered that somewhat through the scene that we were discussing.
Yeah.
And yes, but if you'd like to elaborate in general on either the
I
role.
think I think it's I think it's self-explanatory,
Yes.
on how these Americans see what kind of woman they're seeking, and then
Yes.
yeah, from our Western point of view, of course, I
Yeah.
think it's all. Yeah.
It's very interesting, that topic at large, and it's I really enjoyed your film overall, but one of the things that I, in my personal life, am very passionate about is those top, just strong women and promoting uh, women's rights and things of that. And I love discussing these topics because even though I'm very pro, independent women, at the same time, I have some traditional values. So I do see elements of pros and cons in either, but it is interesting that point you bring up and how there are certain, as you mentioned, these meetings that occur for, let's say, American men looking for Eastern European or Ukrainian women, based on that kind of marketing technique of, oh, you're getting what American women don't provide, and it's so it is an interesting topic because even as myself, a businesswoman, and having done some talent as well, so having that kind of independent, career driven, but then also cooking for my husband and things that I really enjoy that are more traditionally based. It's possible to have both. And I feel like even some of my American friends are like, oh, wow, you cook. And it's just something that it's a thing
Yeah.
that brings pleasure. So it is interesting kind of, I think to some people have that view of, to be an independent woman, you can't have, maybe you have to have very little, if at all, maybe no traditional values. And then maybe the perception of, to be traditional, you can't be having aspirations of something bigger. So that's always been an interesting topic I've discussed with friends.
I don't know if you've seen the last season of The Crown, where
I did. I just finished it a
yeah,
couple weeks ago.
With Margaret Thatcher, that she's there and she's with the apron
Yes.
and everything. It's like, and she's cooking food for these generals and these
Yes.
ministers.
Yes.
It's yeah, that was so brilliant, so
It
interesting.
it was. I loved her character, and that
But
the actress was
yeah, of
phenomenal.
course that. But just to say that, of course, that this whole topic is very complicated and
Yeah.
complex, and I mean, especially one of the things that I heard recently is that since the 70s, the happiness level of men, like generally in society, has been stable,
Okay.
but women's happiness levels, okay, have plummeted basically, since the 60s, 70s.
Interesting.
Yeah, you can Google it with, like, with all with women's liberation and everything, and that's happening in society. You would imagine that they would increase actually, but women, for some reason, are more
Yeah.
less happy now than they were a few
Hey,
decades.
I mean, let's be honest. I'm all about being independent, but if you don't have to worry about too much, that's not always a bad thing.
By the way, just about the cooking now during the quarantines everywhere,
Yes.
like cooking is like I love cooking for myself. I mean, it's not. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's not a gender thing, but definitely, 5,000 years of patriarchy and roles that we had certain roles. The men did this and the women did that, and then everything disintegrated. Um, but still, we still have only 24 hours in the day, and we still
That's
have.
right.
So it's like yeah, it's very complicated. So
Yes, it is, but an interesting topic nonetheless.
yeah.
At the end of the film, there's a young woman who is pressured by an American man to dance with her as they are dancing together in a dance hall. We find out that this young woman is Anna's daughter, who was shown earlier in the movie. And, as you obviously know, it being your film, Anna's daughter is kind of saved by her mother, which erupts into anger, push the man's off of her, which leads to all of sorts of violence between the Americans and the Ukrainians women. Why did you choose this scene, and what was the reason you chose Anna to encounter her daughter in this sort of precarious scenario?
Well, it's made clear in the first part of the film that she's still in school, right? So she's just
Yes.
15 or 16 or
Young.
something like that. And then the mother hears this advertisement, and she goes to this party hoping maybe to meet somebody, and then she meets her daughter there, which is obviously too young to be there. So I just found, this idea of putting them together just hilarious. So, I
Yeah,
mean, and very meaningful, of course, because she's the young daughter, just like the mother, also wants to, to escape to a better life. And you can imagine that she hears this advertisement also, just like her mother, and like, oh, American men are coming in town, and that's your chance to
right.
escape for a better life. And she decides, okay, I'm going to dress up nice, and I'm going to leave the apartment without my mother hearing it. And then the two of them meet there, and the mother, and Anna thinks that it's absolutely ridiculous because she's so young and she would not let her leave the country without her. But she's there herself, hoping to meet somebody.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like it's both comical and funny, but also sad and very
I
meaningful.
know. I know, exactly. Yeah, very much so. Kind of well, I'm curious about this. Tell me about the main actress. I found her very good and compelling. What was your reason for choosing her to play Anna? Anastasia, I believe is her name.
Uh, Anastasia is the young daughter.
Okay,
Svetlana is Anna.
okay.
So just like with the story with the horses and the carriage before, um, so we had a casting director. It's like you would not believe this. Like it's just so funny. Making this film was so funny. So she's the best casting director in Ukraine. Okay, she's the only one really. Okay, with super famous whatever. Anyway, a few weeks, at 3 weeks before I came to Ukraine to make the film, she had a baby. Okay,
Oh.
but she was 45, like Anna in the film. Okay, but she tried to convince me that Anna is too old because women in Ukraine have a baby when they're 20. Now she's trying to convince me that while she sits there and her baby, who is 2 weeks old, is just like right there next to us. So it was like, I was like, no, it can happen. Look, it happened to you also. But she tried to convince me that it can't happen because I'm telling the story of, rural Ukraine, and there it would never happen. Whatever. Anyway, so she didn't agree with my choices. So she kept sending me for the audition very young Annas, okay? 28, 27, 32. And I was like, no, it's not what I was looking for. And she was like really pushing me to, to like, yeah, to do what she wanted for some reason. Yeah. As if that was going to work. Anyway, so we just kept making auditions. Okay, I will tell you another funny story. So we kept making auditions until and I kept saying, no, it's not what I'm looking for, and looking on pictures, blah blah blah, blah. And then one day Svetlana came, and I looked at her and I was like, yes, this is the Anna I was looking for. She was like, when you write a script, you have somebody in your mind, and I'm just like very much knew what I was looking for, and who I was looking for, and yeah. So as soon as I met, saw her, and she, because she's very sweet and a warm person, and she's like, yeah, she's like a big teddy bear, and she's wonderful, and it comes through the screen like a real character. So as soon as I saw her, I was like, yeah, like she's Anna. So
She did wonderfully. She played the role wonderfully. And yes, the fact that, as you mentioned, she isn't the prototypical, maybe the stereotype of who would go to even these type of events, as was portrayed in Anna. But it made that even more compelling because you're like, oh, okay, this isn't maybe the norm. But as you also mentioned, you could tell, probably as a person, but her character really exuded this sort of like warmth and something very nurturing about her, and even innocence about her. I was,
yes,
as a viewer,
yeah,
I was rooting for
innocence.
her to get out of her
Yeah,
circumstance.
innocence is a good word. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Svetlana, 20 years ago, when she was 25, she did participate in one of these parties.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's very well known in Ukraine. So in Ukraine, probably every other girl or woman at one point went to these parties, you know, because it's also free for the women to participate. So, you know, you come, you get free drinks and free
Yeah,
food and
that's true.
yeah, and whatever. Yeah, I will go, sure, for why not? So they all, so they, so a lot of them go to these parties and so and she has memories from 20 years ago going to these parties. So,
Wow. I'm sure that
yeah.
was interesting
Yeah,
to,
but just to say, you said that like it's not like the typical, you know, she's not like the typical girl who would go to the party. Like, why would I be, so from a storytelling point of view, I wouldn't want, it's not interesting to tell the story of what, you know, of just a girl in her
that's true.
23 who goes to a party like this. I mean, to be honest, the first draft of the script, she was actually 16. So I thought about, oh, I will make it about a very young girl who fakes being 18 to go to the party. But then I thought, wait a minute, it's much more interesting if it's actually a much older woman. And then it took me 2 more seconds to think, oh, and then she would meet her 16 years old daughter, and I could have both of them together there, and you know, and it just, and the whole thing was ready in my mind.
Yes. That, you know, that the whole, it would be interesting talking uh, with her about her experience going to these type of events. Have you seen the documentary Love Me? That was one I saw on Netflix
Yeah,
about,
yeah, yeah,
I'm
everything.
sure you've seen. And yeah, it is so interesting. I found, it's been a while since I've watched that one, but I've seen that and a couple others on that topic. And you know, there are several components which are, I find interesting and compelling to know, to kind of learn more about, and specifically in a way, how some American men can even be so gullible. I remember there were accounts, whether it was in Love Me or one of the other ones I watched, where
Yeah,
they would just believe anything at the thought of having some young, submissive,
no,
foreign,
it's so sad in
almost,
this
it
film.
is sad.
Yeah,
It's,
there is this guy, because in that film it's different. It's about the men that fly there, right?
yes,
And
yes,
then and then you have to pay for every email exchange. You pay per email.
yes,
So they
yes,
just have, that's actually such a great story for a film also.
yeah,
So they have this, you know, this random people who just sit right, they probably copy paste, you know, they copy
yeah,
paste
exactly.
email like, hey, how are you? Today I went to the garden and I picked up roses. Anyway, so then this guy flies to Ukraine to meet this woman who he was speaking with.
Right,
And
quote
on the
unquote.
picture, she looks like Angelina Jolie. And then he gets there, and this girl is not even
It
like,
looks like
she
Roseanne.
doesn't want to meet him. She doesn't want to meet him, right? And
Exactly.
then they bring her, and you realize that she just sits there and she doesn't know who this guy is.
Yeah.
And he bring her a rose, I
Ah,
think. Oh my God,
I
it's so
know.
sad. It's
It
so
is pretty.
sad. Yeah.
It's definitely different. I think you know, right. So, you know, sometimes that desperation, that willingness to want, even in some cases where some of the Ukrainian women were even maybe more maybe not as direct as the prototypical American woman, but there were still some instances where some Ukrainian or Eastern European women would essentially show the person up and send signals, and the man would still want to believe, you know. So it is, it's a,
Yeah.
it's
But I have
definitely
to say,
like
this
that.
is like, there's so many, it's so sad and complicated also. I
Yes,
mean, because if we want to go deeper into that, then Ukraine, you know, Ukraine is very, it's a country that's just been stuck between Russia and the West in Europe, and it's been ravaged in wars going back and forth, including right now. I mean, right now there is a war there, and the amount of alcoholism there. Okay, so like so many men are alcoholic there, and women also, I guess. But there is actually like, there are areas in Ukraine that it's like 60% women and 40% men
oh
or
wow.
something like that. Yeah. and a lot of the men are like unemployed because there's no work, or uneducated and alcoholic, all these things. So so imagine you hear an advertisement for for a party like this, come and meet American men, and you're like, oh my God, it's your only ticket out,
Right.
right? And then on the other hand, you have these men from rural US, let's say, from some small place, and they are, I don't know what the hell they're doing. I don't know. I don't want to get into it, but like
Sure.
they hear an advertisement, go to Ukraine, you can meet these desperate women who just want to escape, and even that you are not really like, you're not such a good deal, they will jump all over you because
Ah,
just because you're American and you can take them back with you. So,
yeah.
the sad thing is that it's true, because they would do anything to leave these places, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's awful. That's what the film is about. I mean, the film is very realistic, and people say that it looks like a documentary, but
Yeah, in a way.
it could have shown it even more dark
Yeah.
and worse even than in the film,
100%.
so it's really desperate, anyway. So
It is. And one of when you were saying that you could show how, even worse it could be, it made me think too of back to that scene where Anna and the Texas guy and the translator were sitting there. And even though the translator, as we established early on, was just kind of saying whatever the American man wanted to hear, then even she realized when he was saying, basically he wanted to give her a test, a
yeah,
test run, that even she, the translator, was like, okay, go to the bathroom and don't, or say, I'll say
don't
you're going to the bathroom, don't
smile,
come back.
smile, stand
Right.
up, smile, don't come back. Yeah,
Exactly. And so if it was shown in another way, meaning, it could have gone, as you mentioned, so dark and even into that. So I felt like I know it's a nice, interesting, a good balance, and that it could have been much worse,
yeah,
and maybe by not showing, as extreme as it could be, and maybe in a way was a good, but then also it showed enough, even with not showing how bad it could be, the viewer still sees enough that realizes, wow, this is
yeah,
pretty grave thing, a serious subject. So yeah,
yeah.
yes. So kind of, departing from that specific topic, I believe I read that you've traveled to over 60 countries, which is
Huh?
amazing, by the way. Was there a reason, and you kind of actually hit on this earlier, but was there a reason that you chose the Ukraine to set this film in with the accompanying theme? Do you feel that Ukraine is worse than some other countries or areas in regards to this kind of suppression or expectation of women to be submissive?
um well, I'm sure that there are countries that are more traditional in this sense. I mean, Nepal is definitely more traditional in that sense, but then, you can go to places like Saudi Arabia when women
True.
are allowed to drive, but only since 6 months ago or something like that. I
Exactly.
mean, so yeah, but why I went there, as I said, I was traveling there also because I was having like I have Ukrainian roots, but also just as a filmmaker. So I was traveling before I was a filmmaker, um, and going around and shooting these films around the world was an opportunity for me to like keep traveling while I'm making films. So that was great. But then, of course, I mean, really, it's just more interesting for me personally to go and tell stories which are more interesting for me as a filmmaker and just as a person to explore. I mean, if you're working on something, on a film like that for 4 months, you want to do something that is intriguing and
Yes.
interesting and foreign for you. So I've been in Nepal and I've been in Ukraine, but I'm still, it's still super foreign for me. So it was like exciting for me, much more interesting for me to go and tell these stories than, go to my hometown and tell the story of my hometown. That's not interesting for me. I've lived there for years. Why would I want to go back there? And then, but there's a few layers to it, and then of course, there's not a lot of films that are made in these countries. I mean, especially in
Right.
Nepal, but also in Ukraine, compared to the UK or to the US. So, so you make the film knowing that hopefully more people would be interested to see it because it's coming from a country that they don't get a lot of films from those countries. If you
Yes.
I'm just talking from the point of view of somebody who's just starting in filmmaking and thinking, how am I going to increase the chances that anybody is going to watch my film? Like, why would somebody care about my film? There are 30,000 short films made every year, something like that. 20,000, 30,000, and the big festivals, they accept 10 films, 30 films, so it's just like insanely impossible to get your work to screen anywhere, right? So it was a combination of all these different reasons that made me leave London, where I was living prior to this project, um, and I flew to Nepal and then to Ukraine, and the rest is history, as they say. So that's the story.
And what are you working on next? What do you have kind of upcoming?
So the next, actually, after this long story about traveling around the world, the third part was supposed to be shot in Israel. So I thought that if I'm making these 5 films, I better make one of them in my country. So I wrote one for Israel, and my plan was to go and shoot that one next. But then when Anna premiered in Cannes, people asked me like, what are you working? What feature are you working on? And I'm like, a feature? What? So I don't know what you're talking about. So I quickly took that short segment and I expanded it into a feature, which now I'm working on. And yeah, I'm wrote already several drafts of the script, and it's been accepted to the Jerusalem Film Lab, which is a development lab that they accept a few projects every year, and you work with a mentor over 6 months and work on the script. And we've been accepted to another development program in the Czech Republic just a few weeks ago.
Oh, I think
Developing the feature there, and but I also already found producers, and I'm even speaking already with with all kinds of it's being worked on, and hopefully in a year and a half, in a year or something like that, we will actually get to shoot it. So as soon as this whole nonsense finishes, we'll be able to start working on it in a more proper way.
well, that will be wonderful, right when you do, and hopefully everything improves sooner than later.
Yeah,
So,
and I will go back to Israel just to make this film. So it's like this
exactly.
it's weird closing this circle of like, yeah. Anyway, and it's very funny that it happened like that, because I could have had some other project in some other country, and that would have ended up being my first feature, because usually filmmakers, like a filmmaker is he makes it if he makes a film outside of his country, a feature film.
Yes.
So if he's able to do an international film. And I was already working outside of my country, and I could already go and make a film anywhere I wanted. But somehow I went back to Israel to make a
Yeah.
film there. So it's like, yeah, it's funny. But I'm super happy about it, and the project and the script and everything. So
Oh, that's great. And I think that's most of the questions I had for you today, unless there's anything that you wanted to add or let people, if you'd like, you can let people know how they can learn more about Anna, and stay up to date with your films or anything that you have going on?
Yeah, they can check out the website of the film, which is annashortfilm.com, or just look for Anna Dekel Berenson and find my website and the film website, and just stay up, sign up on the Facebook page and all those things and stay updated.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure doing this Q&A with you, Dekel. And the Paris International Film Festival is so happy to have you. Much continued success to you in the future.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.